Hi, I'm Liana. I'm now known as the person who started an online petition called I Am 26 in view of asking for a discourse on Sharia law in Malaysia. I think most of the points in relation to these issues have been brought up by the panel. But I think the biggest elephant in the room is the fact that we as a society has been de-educated. And because of that, we believe what was told by us top down, which is the whole reason why I think we all should ask for discourse. Because every time we want to talk about something, then the whole, you cannot talk about it because you're not Muslim, you cannot talk about this because it's hukum Allah, comes into play. But the reason why people don't want to talk about it, or people don't want to even bother going there, is not really about oppression by the top down, but also because we are not confident enough in our own knowledge about things, I guess. But I always see, like even currently, all the articles that came out is always pass UMNO, power. Nobody talks about educating the society, about actually knowing the constitution, about actually knowing what is Islam, which is majority of our religion. Nobody talks about education. And I think that is a big gap.
Just very quickly comment. I agree with you, Liana. Education is really important. And this brings me to one point I was also going to make. Professor, the survey that you, by the Pew Center that you put up, I noticed that there was no survey done on India. And India really is an interesting power keg because, you have a very, very large Muslim population, and you also have an extremely large, for want of a better word, well, I'm not going to say nutter, but I'm going to say an extremely large, well, I'm going to say it anyway, nutter, Hindu, extreme population. And if you see some of their response, if you look at organizations like the Shiv Sena and so on, they have also behaved no different than some of the religious fanatics that you and I have come to see. So perhaps the underlying problem in India especially is that of education. So I agree with the point that you make, Liana.
I always said that, first of all, that religion doesn't speak by itself. It's spoken through the people that follows it. So, I keep saying, hearing about Islam being a peaceful religion and all that, but what we see actually that, the Muslims are portraying Islam as a very nasty religion. So, how do we go about that? That's number one. Number two, as a Malay, I have always said again that I'm the most oppressed in this country. I'm being told what to wear, what to eat, how to live my life, what to believe. Okay, I am the worst citizen in Malaysia. I am most oppressed, and this is why I don't understand how other Malays cannot even think, a little bit that why are they being told to do this and that, and just following blindly, to these religious authorities or those so-called scholars and ulamas. And I have an issue about these scholars and ulamas because they think that, they are the one who speak for God. And it's time, I think, that we actually get out of that sort of mentality. And another issue that I have is that with the incoming of these hudud laws in Kelantan, the non-Muslim, please do not think that you are not included. Please look at clause 56, 57, and 58 of the Kelantan bill. Okay, it says very clearly there that it's open to anybody if you are found to be abating, any crime. So have a look again at that Kelantan bill. And now the other issue I have is about the politicians. It's easy to blame the government. Yes, they have responsibilities to shut these people down who are the extremists. But what is happening to the opposition as well? They are as bad as them. You know, I mean, I don't hear any, anything from other, like PKR especially. At least DAP is very loudly, they speak very clearly. They are against, all these hudud laws and everything. But what about PKR? So really, we have nowhere to turn now. So when we cannot rely on the politicians, who do you rely to? Ourselves. So I say, don't be afraid to speak up to everybody, to the Malays, to the Chinese, to the Indians, to all Malaysians. Speak up. How many people can they put in the prison? You know, everybody stand up and they want to arrest everybody. Let's do it. You know, we need to stand up and go against this extremism. This is not Islam, okay? So we must say this is not Islam, and we are not going to follow what you say. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Thanks. My name is Nicole. I just have 3 key points to state. I generally feel the discourse on religious freedom, when we use the word freedom, we don't talk about unfreedom. Freedom for few, but who has to compromise their freedoms for the freedom of few people. So I'd just like to start with this whole thing that started recently about religious extremism, the 22 quote-unquote prominent Malays, whoever they are, whatever prominence they hold. But the thing is, I find this kind of discourses coming from us, writers, thinkers, academics, is underlining and overshadowing the larger issue which is at stake, which is economic terrorism. Because as much as we talk about religious extremism, we have to talk about economic terrorism, economic fundamentalism, which finds the root. Let me give you an example. When Malaysia had transited from a peasantry community, from a peasant-based community, mostly Malay folks, up into an industrialized nation in 1980, people were forced out of their kampongs. And in such an industrial nation, in a world where material wealth is told to be chased after, people are seeing a need for identity. And I find when identity comes into place, this escalation of identity is so, this Muslim identity, this Christian identity. You have Hindu fascism, you have Christian fascism, it's not just Islamic fascism. It's just whether we want to open our eyes to see it. So we can't delink the economy. It's not just about money. I just don't think it's about religion is out there for money, but it's also about how money is out there for religion. And I think we cannot delink religion from the economic and the politics. You can't delink culture from politics and economics. And I think it's very important to understand, as Malaysia was also a majority practicing Muslim country, religion started to compromise and alter its tenets to capitalism. It started negotiating and compromising its revolutionary ideas to a capitalist form that it needed, that capitalism could cater. And this is a huge problem that we need to be speaking about, which I think often we do not talk about the economic aspect of. And I think when this happened, issues like, I'm so sorry. So I think when we talk about these issues, that is one of it. And then I want to talk about hudud. I think, as far as I think in post-colonial studies, one of the aspects we talk a lot about is that law. We have to talk about law in general. Law is a form of judgment. And the current law that we preach, the federal law, the supremacy of law, also has its roots in Victorian Christian teachings. Is that good? Does it serve the need? Or is the rule of law just a tool, the constitution I speak, or is the rule of law just a further thing to actually reinforce inequality? So my question is, if we can have an imagination of Victorian-inspired laws, why not, if another group wants to come out with an imagination of hudud laws? I do not agree with law in principle because it's a tool of judgment, but in this, if we can have laws which is inspired in Victorian ages, why not laws which is inspired in so on? Why do we need to have this stingent idea of law just needing to inspire from a very secular, whatever secular means, idea? So maybe we need to have this discourse. And another thing I think which so often we do not talk about is also ISIS. That's my third point, and I'm finishing with my third point. we talk about ISIS in Malaysia so often, but we never actually really talk, because ISIS is creating a lot of havoc with the whole creation of the POTA law, the Preventions of Terrorism Act. But we do not talk, where did this group of people come from? When a suicide bomber bombs himself, we often say, oh, that is terrorism. But never do we ask the questions, what leads a person, what leads a young man with dreams to go to that extent, to explode himself? And I think this is important because we need to talk about people who resist, people who see religion as a source of hope to resist. And I think ISIS is about how a group of people from a region which has rampaged and terrorized are resisting. Of course, it's taken a vacuum of power today. So just by debunking it and saying this is terrorism, this is useless, no. I think we need to contest these issues with things that are there. And if you're not going to contest this and we are going to come with arguments as such, I think it's going to become dangerous. And ending my thing is, let's also talk about spaces in which we have to have the discussion. Religious spaces are being privatized day by day, not just by the states, but by religious people themselves. We, the people who pray, our religious spaces are being privatized in great ways. The mosques are becoming larger. People are not welcome. Gender-biased spaces. And all of this, I think, needs to be talked about within this whole neoliberal framework, which I think often enough is not spoken. So maybe if you could, any one of you take the mic and talk about how do we link economic fundamentalism with religious extremism. Thanks.
Okay, those were some very thoughtful comments. So perhaps you can get the panel to respond first.
Can you hear me? I'm really not sure where to start on that one. So we started in one place and ended up in another. It's what struck me about a lot of these conversations, and obviously I was trying to set a larger stage for the backdrop for religious freedom in general and the problematic in any nation state, and clearly the people here are dealing with this as Malaysian citizens and have their own problems, have their own particular sets of issues, which to be honest, while I can intellectually grasp them, emotionally are not, they don't hit me in the same way. So when I'm in my home country and when I see issues, they really hit me. And when I hear things being said, I'm thinking to myself, oh, I would like to prevent that person from even saying these things aloud. And typically they are, this is one of these things that typically liberals and progressives in the majority culture tend to see their fellow majority culture conservatives as being oppressive. And so the liberals and the progressives tend to want to, in some way, curb majority culture to keep it within a particular set of limits that makes everyone feel like they have a place at the table to be a citizen. And I think that's kind of a universal phenomenon. And not surprisingly, I'm at a table of progressives and liberals. And these are the people who wind up, and by the way, it's interesting to me, without people coming from within the majority tradition, the majority culture to do this, it's often the case that minority groups have a problem doing this on their own. Now, I have to say, if you're dealing with a nation state that you're supposed to have civil codes, everyone should be able to petition the government for equal rights on their own without needing the cultural majority to give them the okay. But the reality of society structures, it would have been very difficult, to give you a parallel example, for blacks in the US to receive full treatment and equality, which one could argue they still do not have, but they couldn't even make the petition without having the white majority or a faction of the white majority speak on their behalf. And so in some cases you need groups working together for this kind of thing. Minority groups, whether it's ethnic or religious, who need the majority to open its eyes to the way in which the majority, in some cases unbeknownst to them, wind up suppressing or oppressing, and in some cases, to be quite honest, in the ways in which the majority culture intentionally does this in order to maintain dominance. And in some cases, this dominance, I would say, is not just a religious dominance, it is a cultural, social, and it's an economic dominance. Because you can use religion to legitimize all kinds of things, including ways in which you can control the economy. And so in some ways, to open up the society and the space for freedom of expression, freedom of religion, is another way of saying that you're opening up also the economic system for this, right? So I'll let it go at that.
The only point I wanted to mention was, insofar as economic issues are concerned, I echo what you said, Professor Yenny. It's just legitimizing of economic beliefs, economic interests using religion. And that is the part that I fear most, because it does not allow for the average Malaysian to now, or it doesn't give the average Malaysian any opportunity to think. It is, you have to do it this particular way. Now, but your question was a little bit more than that. If I heard you correctly, you talked about the lack of opportunities, and in order to mask or to quell the anger over the lack of opportunities, religion is used as a substitute. That may very well be the case, because religion often has been used to justify various actions. Things happen because this is what religion has dictated that I do or we should do. But it begs the question, what is everybody going to do about it? Are we going to sit down and we're going to mumble over this and sit down? Malaysia, by the way, is still by and large a very comfortable country. If you have traveled to other countries, you would find that things are a lot more less rosy there than in Malaysia. So in a way, we should be a little bit more grateful. Malaysia is still all right.
For a minority view, it's easy.
Well, not really. It is still okay. But I'm not saying that we rest on our laurels and we take it as it is. There's a lot of scope for improvement in Malaysia. That's the message I'm trying to I'm trying to pass. We cannot always have a very pessimistic view. If you have a positive outlook, things will change.
I think I'll answer the one by Nicole just now. I think it's a very interesting question. I think I was not sure whether he was trying to play devil's advocate here. Okay, all right. He was saying that, what's the problem with these hudud laws if we can basically subject ourselves to these Victorian-inspired laws? Why can't we be subjected under hudud laws, right? That was what you were saying. Yeah. So, that's a very good thing. But the problem is that because our constitution, right, our constitution was written by our forefathers, and even though it did not specifically say that whether this is an Islamic country or this is a secular country, right, but it shows, right, the intention of our forefathers was that Malaysia is supposed to be a secular country. The word secular was never mentioned in that particular constitution, right? And this has been argued again and again in the court of laws, especially the case of Cik Omar Cik Soh. I think everybody over here knows about this particular case, right? How this Chief of Justice at the time argued that based on that particular case, because that fellow Cik Omar Cik Soh must be subjected under the rule of law of our country, and that is a secular law and not under Islamic law. So he cannot escape the death penalty under him, because he was under secular law, because even though it was un-Islamic to subject him for death penalty. But I wouldn't argue, I would say that the thing is that what is most important for us to understand is that because the forefathers had laid the foundation for us, now if we are trying to change that particular foundation, right? So to me, even though I know Shah Rezan from the Bar Council argued that it did not require an amendment of our constitution, but I still feel that it touches on the fabric of our constitution. And the fabric of our constitution says that in Article 8 that all men are equal before the law, meaning to say that there cannot be two sets of laws, especially concerning this penal code, right? There cannot be two sets of law. You cannot penalize someone for stealing by chopping off his hand, and the other one would be jail for 6 months. There cannot be inequality, because once there is inequality, then it is against the Constitution, against Article 8 of the Constitution. Therefore, to me, it is null and void. So that's my argument about this. And I hope you understand that that is why I personally, I'm against this whole idea, because it's going to change the fabric of our society. It's going to basically, it is all right if it is passed unanimously or passed with a majority, but everyone must be informed, must be fully informed, and must be able to fully participate in the discussion and dialogue. Not by just saying that, no, this is hudud law, this is divine. So because this is divine, you have no right to question about the laws. This is wrong. This is wrong idea and wrong approach, right? Let everybody decide. Let everybody discuss and debate about this particular topic, because this is going to change the fabric of our society. And to Siti, I know that she's going to talk today. She talks almost at every forum, okay? So, and you're saying about whether we can basically depend on the opposition. I would say no, we can't. To me, as I said, you know, like, to me, let me say it today, because they can't put me under sedition law, let me say that they are as bad as the people they wanted to change. Yes. It's as simple as that. Because if you look at you know, cases upon cases, they have not shown to be true democrats. They have not shown themselves to be true democrats. They have not shown themselves to be true fighters for human rights, true fighters for justice, true fighters for freedom of speech and expression. What is probably more important to them was probably, Maria might not agree with me, but probably was to defend their leader. And that's the most important thing. By hook or by crook, he must be out. It's the case, the details of the case are not important, you know. The accusation against the judiciary is important. The judiciary is partial. The judiciary is basically under the what do you call control of this executive, and you know, and cast aspersion upon the judicial system of our country. And that's, to me, that's very unhealthy. You know, you have to be very objective. Look at the case. Look at the evidence, right? We can understand, right? Because we are very educated, so we can understand. As a doctor myself, as a surgeon, I can basically understand the entire evidence being presented. So let us look at the case. I won't argue whether it was a political conspiracy or not, because it was being presented as it was a political conspiracy. But issue at hand is that there are larger things for us to debate, for us to discuss, for us to fight upon, right? Not only this particular case. Thank you.
I just want to respond a short one. I don't think, while I agree that, you know, there may be an economic base in terms of how we analyze religion, but it is not the only analysis where, you know, all religion has to have an economic base. Because I think that when it comes to religion, there are values and beliefs that are not sometimes connected to the class factor, so to speak. And I think that we have to start analyzing why and accepting that, you know, not every issue need to have an economic answer to that. But what is most important is really that at the end of the day, whether we are bringing about justice and equality. I think that is the most important thing that we have to put forward when we talk about religion, when we talk about culture, when we talk about our economy and so forth. The other one is that in terms of the re-education, I think that it is not just about awareness, but I think that it is the structure, the system that we have that needs a lot of revamp. Because if you look at the education system, it is leading us to be uncritical. You know, it teaches us to actually behave like a parrot. You just have to half out everything and you will pass. And that's why, you know, you have students with 9 A's, 12 A's, 15 A's, and we think that, you know, these are our best students. But no offense to people who get that A's. But I think that, you know, what we need now also, besides the A's, is really critical thinking. What we need is really for people to actually say that, you know, can we unlearn what we have learned? Can we change what we have been always taught to accept? I think that is what we are saying when we talk about we need change, we need reform. It is really not so much that we want to topple over the government, which is now a seditious act. But I think that we want to improve this country, and that's why we want to talk about it. And that is the most important thing.
Yes. Hi, good evening. My name is Jack. I'm from Malaysia. I would like to bring one particular case to point is about apostasy because human beings' life is at risk here. Sorry, can you hear me now? Okay, just give me a second. I'll just tilt it over. Okay. First of all, I would like to explain the first apostasy case I heard in Malaysia was Lena Joy. And when she was trying to come out of Islam, she was a Muslim. And she went through a long legal process in the civil court. And after 2 years, she disappeared. That's what I understand, because the case was not recorded and there's no history after that. There were several other cases. Another most important one I would like to highlight is Revati's case, where she was trying to come out of Islam. Her parents converted her. I'm not sure exactly who converted her, but she tried to convert out of Islam. She was then sent to a camp where she was supposed to eat beef and repent. Now, things have changed. This is several years, I mean almost a decade. I'm not really sure how long ago, but it was a long time ago. But recently there are cases, or at least the perception of news saying that people from Islam can come out of it if they go through a process in the Sharia court. Because they can't do that in the civil court, because in their identity card it says that they're Muslim, and because of that the case will not be heard in civil court. So what happens in the Sharia court is, I'm very sure not many of you are familiar with, what usually happens to these Muslims are that they first asked why they're converting out, then they put through a long process, about 9 counseling sessions which last to about a year, then they will still be put through many different kinds of issues whereby they'll be asked different questions, why you're coming out, that it's like a legal process which amounts to nothing. Some have spent their time over 3 years only to be exhausted by the entire process. But what is interesting is, a Muslim can never come out of the religion even by Sharia court's rule. I'm a bit confused as to why there is even a charade for that. My question here is simple. Even under hudud law, a Muslim trying to come out of Islam will be killed. It is a right of every Muslim to enforce that rule by law of Quran. Now, there's a human being's life, not one or two. There's numerous human beings' life at stake in Malaysia at this very point of time. Nobody is like one of the quotes that was put forward in the presentation is what Martin Luther King said: "It's the silence of our friends who are not speaking against those who are doing this to people who wants to come out." And I'm not talking about Muslims coming out, also converts who are inadvertently converted but struggling to come out of Islam. My question is simple in the sense that what recourse these people have. As of now, there's no recourse in civil court for these people, and many of them, while waiting for this Sharia, I don't know whether to call it as charades or not, their lives are at risk. So is there any recourse within Malaysia, or even, because what's funny is there's human rights bodies in Malaysia which are supposed to take care of the rights of these people, but Malaysia is getting away with these things, and I do not know any recorded case of people getting killed, but if a Muslim extremist tries to kill them, they can get away in this system, because even if Hudud law is implemented, someone from Kelantan after the Hudud law is implemented goes and kills another person, this is fully justified. Do these people have any recourse in Malaysia or outside of Malaysia? That's my question. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Azhar. Just a very quick question. I mean, we've talked about the fact that, assuming that we all agree that liberal ideals are the best, but how do you go about promoting those ideals in an environment, in a global environment, I might add, where religious puritanism is arguably the single most appealing idea around? And, well, it's appealing because perhaps for very many reasons, and you could argue that the global economy is something to do with that. Yes, we are living in an era with the widest income disparities since the Great Depression. But I personally don't think that that's the whole answer. If you look at some of the people who are joining ISIS today, these are from middle-class, educated backgrounds who have all the opportunities open to them. So I think it's tempting to link these two things, but I think perhaps if you're looking for the answers to religious puritanism, they perhaps lie elsewhere. Perhaps that's something that City Castum could talk about as well. But so my question is, how do you combat the appeal of religious puritanism and present an idea that is more in line with something that everybody can live with?
Could I just, because I think there's a connection between the first two questions.
Can I just ask that question, because it's actually quite linked to what he's saying. Essentially, because we've been hearing a lot about the future of religious freedom, and many examples all over the world about how there is actually a lack of religious freedom and all that. And sometimes, after coming to forums like this, and you go back and you wonder, is there a hope in this country at all? I mean, after going through so many of these forums. I think my question will basically be is that based on your studies and your surveys, are there good examples in various other countries where, I mean, the forces that are against religious freedom and liberty and all that, can be overcome, or at least there's a promise they can be overcome? What I'd like to know is whether you have any examples in any other countries. That will probably give us some idea of what to do going forward. That's my question.
Jump in at least on part of this. I think there's different reasons why religious puritanism, to use that phrase, becomes a kind of popular public discussion point. And it's not just because people are religious Puritans. So religious Puritanism is a political act also. And to give you an example of this and the problem with conversion, if you look at other Middle Eastern Muslim countries, they have some of the same problems with conversion. People do convert, but they convert in secret. And they don't do it publicly because publicly, if you try to do it, your family can go after you or other people can go after you. So it's not that it doesn't happen, but it's hard to do it. Even if you do it legally, you won't want to do it culturally and openly, right? So it becomes a problem. But it's not, so there are these conservative or Puritan sentiments in the society that push for this, but in some cases, governments are complicit in it, and it's not because the governments are Puritan, but merely because they're trying to defend their religious legitimacy. And we see this in Egypt now. I mean, once the current government came into power, and because it pushed and went after the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorists, it wanted to show that it had Islamic legitimacy. So what does it do? It goes after atheists and it goes after gays to show that it is conservative, it is upholding Muslim values. Well, who says it's Muslim values to do those things? Well, the government is taking what is essentially the most Puritan form of Islam. It's the easiest thing to do, but it's also playing into the hands of the conservatives into the society who see the government now for reasons that have nothing to do with an official Islamic view, but they're merely trying to demonstrate their own Muslimness. And that, in essence, ratchets up the Islamization of society. And if you do not have government agencies that are at least pretending to be neutral and objective in these cases, there's no way that you're going to be able to petition the government to be, recognized. So, I mean, in that sense, governments become complicit with religious elements in society, and it winds up, reducing the religious freedom of everyone, both the majority culture and, of course, the minority culture. So this is not just, I mean, there is an issue of religious Puritanism, and from my perspective, if people want to be religious Puritans, that's their business, right? If they want to behave that way and live their lives that way. The question is whether it should be imposed on everyone, and the question is to what extent does the government at least prevent that kind of thing from happening and giving people the opportunity to choose themselves, right?
My name is Fariza, and I'm a student of University of Malaya. And actually, I wanted to add that Maria Chin, I do agree with you when you say that it's the whole system. We have a problem with our own education. We need to look at it properly. We were segregated since young. Our kindergarten is different, you understand? Chinese go to the Chinese kindergarten. The Muslims go to the Islamic. And a huge of ulamas actually goes to only Malay schools. And we were being built like that. This is the society that we need to understand, this kind of society that we have. And when you say that it's about economy, I wanted to disagree with you, Dipendra. They were purely believe that what they were doing is true. Do you understand? They believe in that, and they truly believe in that. And I'm used to believe in that. I'm telling you, I'm from Islamic schools until Form 3, and then I went to public schools, and I have lots of friends. And then, it's a very different experience that I have, makes you change your mind. And this kind of ustads and ustazah, okay, they didn't go to any schools that have any other religion. They go it might be from earlier year, they go to the same Malay Islamic schools, and then go to the schools that is Islamic schools until the end of, and go to the UIA, which didn't even allow you not to wearing scarf. I'm telling you, no, we need to understand this group of peoples and how to deal with them. I keep on arguing, and I'm not good enough in arguing because I'm not good enough in Arabic. And I was, this kind of society that we have, we were segregated too much, even in the universities. And we need to look at it purely, our education, our society system, the policy that we have is not healthy in our countries. And we need to look at it properly. And those ustad and ustazah truly believe in that. They believe what they believe in. They didn't want money. I'm telling you, they don't want money. They were among the poorest. Ustad ustazah is not that rich. They were teachers. Teachers is being paid. How much? How much teachers being paid? Come on. Those are the peoples that thinking that. And lots of my friends actually believe in that. And I can't argue with them because I'm arguing with my critical thinking. Because I'm thinking it's your own thinking. It's not from the Al-Quran. Come on. You don't know even hadith, any hadith that you remember? No, I don't remember any hadith. Yes. I did learn some Arabic. Yeah. But the thing is, we need to believe this kind of people, and let's look at it like, and they don't speak English. And it's a very privilege that all of us do understand English. I'm telling you, most of them don't understand English. I'm telling you. I'm sad to say that, but please look at it. They don't even read any English book. And diorang haramkan, they they ban the books that they don't actually read. And I need you to look at this properly in a very broad view. That's all.
Hello, my name is Rashid, and I'm just a regular person. I think we can all agree that we need to be more proactive in trying to raise awareness about secular liberal values like religious freedom and freedom of conscience and a right to free speech and all that. But I'm not sure how I as a person who comes from a largely conservative Malay Muslim background, I'm supposed to do such a thing. Like personally, I'm not I'm a non-religious person, but my family is most of my family is conservative. Most of my friends are conservative, and most of my colleagues are conservative. So I'm living around people who are mostly conservative, and for most of those people, concepts like liberalism and secularism are alien to them. They barely have any understanding about these things, and yet they already have preconceived notions or negative preconceived notions about what these ideals are. And personally, I'm not sure how I can imagine how I'm supposed to engage them in these ideas when they are very anti of these ideas lah. And another thing, although they are excuse my English because I'm not very good at the speaking English. And another thing, although we have like progressive liberal scholars, Islamic scholars, who push for more progressive values within Islam, as a person who comes from a background of who comes from a conservative background, I have been exposed to more conservative ideas about what Islam is supposed to be, and I'm not personally if I compare between the conservative imams and the conservative imams and scholars, and the progressive imam and scholars, most of the time I feel like the conservative imam and scholars have the better argument, the better hujah when it comes to what true Islam is. I'm not sure if people understand, but I'm not saying that I agree with those conservative imams, but when those conservative imams are making their case, making their arguments, I see them making more sense within the context of Islam than the progressive imams. So I'm not sure how the progressive scholars are supposed maybe they have to up the game a bit, because even me as a non-religious person, I can see how the progressive scholars are supposed to outbeat the conservative scholars, and that's it.
Hello, my name is Aizat Shamsuddin. I'm from Muslims for Progressive Values, Malaysia. We working hand in hand with Muslims for Progressive Values in other countries like USA and other countries across the globe. Something to do with the last two speakers. They said about how people, the conservative society, it's nothing to do with the economy. It's all about belief. How they are taught to believe that a Sharia or the Islamic law should be the system of a country. So when we're talking about religion, freedom of religion, the religion should not be a system in the first place. So when people saying that this is not Islam. This is not Islam. This is not how Islam teaches people. This is not how Muhammad teaches its followers. And what do you provide? You know, the alternative that you provide. So the lack, you know, in the discussion is that when you a lot more condemn or a lot more insult towards these conservative ideas without even providing the alternatives for the conservative society to embrace. For example, Muslims for Progressive Values, we stand on the basic fundamental principles in the Quran and Hadith. And it's all about the interpretation of Quran and Hadith. And how you interpret it, it's very, very, you know, it's very important. For example, when you say that Sharia is you have in the first place to dispel what Sharia as a basic system or as a ruling system. So you should dispel how? In the Quran and Hadith, there is no word of Sharia, means, you know, it's a legal system. It means a route or the way to live, the way of life. It's nothing to do with, you know, a legal system. So you have to talk to the people in the mid of, you know, conservative society that most of them live in the rural areas, in the kampong. And then you have to speak in Malay, like she said, how most of the Muslim society, conservative Muslim societies, they have this, you know, linguistic barrier between the progressive Muslims and also the conservative Muslims. And how you gonna propound your ideas towards this conservative Muslim, and then they do not even understand what you're talking about. So what we are going to do is that, and we would like to encourage more people to talk about Sharia, regardless of your religion, regardless of your, you know, citizenship, to talk about Sharia. Sharia is not a legal system. Sharia is the way of life. It's nothing to do about. It's nothing. It got nothing to do about, you know, a controlled system or something like that. So this is the most important, that you have to dispel in the first place the Sharia, so that people, for example, Boko Haram and ISIS in Iraq, in Syria and Nigeria, they believe that Sharia is the system. So this is a divine system. They should uphold the system. And then if they do not uphold the system, they will be thrown in the hell. So they believe, this is the belief, a conservative belief, and the continuity of the belief that we should dispel in the first place. And then it's all about the interpretation of Quran and interpretation of Hadith. And we should talk more about this in the, you know, Malay language or understandable medium. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I just wanted to answer a few questions. So the first one, which this gentleman had raised about apostasy. The short answer is the Qur'an appear to be they're still the best way to go about if a person wants to convert out of Islam. The problem lies is when a civil judge abdicates his duty to deal with these matters, preferring that the matter be dealt with by the Sharia court. It's a question of perception and belief. A person comes to a civil court because he or she may not have confidence in the Sharia court to do a particular thing, and in the hope that the civil court would offer a better, more objective chance. And it's of course very painful to see a civil judge then say, well, I can't deal with this, notwithstanding the fact that the civil courts still trump over Sharia courts. They're not equal under the Constitution. Despite the ambiguous wording, the civil courts still rank supreme. My advice is that if anyone feels that they want to opt out, they should continue to press challenges. They should continue to file a challenge in court, in a civil court, which is why the civil court is there, and let the courts decide. I also believe that if you knock hard enough on the door, eventually it will open. And hopefully with more and more cases, if there are, it could be a catalyst for change. That's unfortunately the best option I can give you, unless you can lobby for legislative change. There are certain conditions in which anyone can convert out of Islam. And I think the only examples which have been given is those who originally converted. I think if you were either Chinese or of Indian backgrounds and you converted and became Muslim, then usually through marriage, and for some reason you need to convert back into your original faith, then that was allowed. And what I found to be quite amusing was that the reason often given for converting out is that, look, I ate pork, therefore I'm no more a Muslim. And I found that to be rather hilarious, because that was apparently the main determining factor whether you're a Muslim or not, without any other considerations. But anyway, that's the pork, and I drank and I smoked and I did all of this, and therefore I'm not a Muslim. But anyway, it is what it is. Now, back to the comments made by the young girl. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name, but it still comes down to your education. What we see is really an option given by the state for ordinary citizens to pursue. There has been a flourishing of religious schools, no doubt about that. We don't know what religious schools teach. I'm not going into that debate because I have not seen what they teach, so I cannot comment. But the onus, I believe, lies with Muslims themselves. If you feel that the situation warrants your intervention, you should not be bothered by the tag that you're progressive or liberal. And again, the fact that someone labels you liberal is not a bad thing. It's an unfortunate perception that you being liberal means you are wayward and therefore you are cohorting with the devil, for want of a better word. Just because you offer an alternate view doesn't make you a liberal. It just makes you someone with a divergent view, that's all. Not a liberal. And I'm sorry, the issue that the gentleman over there was also raised, and I think it also had to do with progressive and liberals. You're right. The so-called progressives need to up their game, because the conservatives, as I see it, are also getting onto the game. They say, look, we can't run tried arguments. We need to improve ourselves. So I suppose the only argument is, or the option left for progressive is to also up their game. The control for the mind and heart of Muslims is never an easy thing, because the very nature of Islam, as I understand it, is that it is part and parcel of your life. You can't pick and choose certain aspects of it. We want to, some of you want to, but the way it stands is that you cannot pick and choose. You have to accept everything in entirety, or if you don't, you're then, it becomes a very difficult issue. I've always felt that there are a lot of so-called liberal Muslims. I don't know why people call them liberal Muslims. You're either a Muslim or you're not. Whether you have narrow views or whether you have broad views, it's a different thing altogether. I think more and more people need to come up and say, look, this is what I feel. And this is how I think Malaysia is going to be judged, and this is how Malaysia should be as we move forward. I hope that helps.
My question wasn't answered about whether there are any examples of how globally, there is more opening up of religious freedom. Examples, did it come from economics or typical NGOs or what?
I was going to put this in terms of, say, Europe, and there was the comment made that there's a difference between Western secularism and how secularism is understood here. I actually believe that it's more similar than people might think, especially given the fact that right now in Europe, the growing presence of Muslims is actually challenging Europe to re-understand what is meant by secular in their own countries. Because, I mean, clearly secularism as it's developed is developed culturally within the framework of the cultures that have dominated in these areas. So if you go to, I mean, France has a different idea of what laïcité is. You go to Sweden, they have different ideas. And, you go to, I mean, the Dutch have different ideas. These different countries, they have developed differently. And even though they might have I mean, what does it mean to have separation of religion and state when in a country in Northern Europe, when you're born, new births always have to be registered at the church? Now, these people don't attend church, and in large part, they never attend, they're not practicing people of religion, but they use the church and they use religious culture as kind of a glue that holds them together, but in a very generic way. They're born into it, they're married in the church, and they die in the church, but they never go to church. Now that's one idea of the secular. And the presence of Muslims who say, why should we have to register ourselves as citizens and go to the church? It makes no sense, right? And it doesn't make sense. And what this is doing, I mean, Europe has been quite content with understanding themselves as being secular, which means that they're objective when it comes to religion. They're not objective at all. They have their own cultural view of this, and actually I think it's, in a strange way, it's the growing presence of Muslims that's really bringing consciousness to Europeans that guess what, you're not really secular in the way you think you are. And so I think there are examples of, in Europe, of the way Muslims are petitioning European countries to be true to their supposed secular values and not be culturally rooted in some understanding of Christianity, right? So I think there are great examples of this. I mean, if you're interested in reading about some of this, there's a great book called The Islamic Challenge by Jit Clausen, who's done studies of various Muslim organizations and their different views of how they're trying to fit Islam and fit Muslims into various, and I have to say various European contexts, and they're not all the same because they all have different histories. Obviously, France is not multicultural at all, and they're trying to make everyone fit into the same mold. What happens in France would be considered to be an imposition or hindering religious freedom in the US. We would consider what happens in France to be hindering people. You know, so these views are different in different countries that have different ideas of what it means to be secular. So I would suggest that there are examples of this clearly in Europe, where Europeans are changing their views and changing some of their laws, or put it this way, not changing them as much as, and here's, I think, something that connects with what's happening here, they're re-understanding and reinterpreting them to be applied more broadly to different groups who have different religious backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds. Because I don't necessarily think you have to change laws as much as re-understand what they mean given the context of the population that you're dealing with.
I think we'll end things there. I'm sure that the panelists, if they can stick around, will be happy